My name is Megs Reynolds, and I'm the Executive Director of the Doomer Agriculture Foundation. We are the national voice and champion for mental health in Canadian agriculture, and you are joining part of our Talk It Out series. This month, our topic is bipolar, and joining me today is Candace Watson. Candace, would you like to further introduce yourself?
Hi, Megs. Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Candace Watson, and I'm a nurse by background. That was my original training. I've worked in many areas: labor and delivery, emerge, adult psychiatry, health link, so kind of the gamut of stuff. But then I did go back to school and got my MBA, and now work at the Canadian Mental Health Association in the Finance and Corporate Services Department.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for being open to share your story. Um, just so people know, maybe do you want to start a little bit at the beginning, like when, or maybe just leading up to your initial diagnosis?
Sure. I had a depression in grade 11. It was never diagnosed, like when I was in grade 11 school. I was never diagnosed or anything. I really kept my feelings to myself. Didn't share anything with my parents, family, friends, nobody. But I kind of really struggled through that year. And then grade 12 was a great year for me. It kind of turned around, felt great. Just had a really successful year. But then in university, I struggled a lot with anxiety and stuff. I went into sciences in my first year, and then from there went into nursing. And in my third year of nursing, I started having panic attacks in school. Just was super anxious all the time. So I started seeing a psychiatrist at the university, and they prescribed me anti-anxiety medications. I didn't really like how I felt on them, so we kind of discussed it, and I ended up coming off them with his approval. But I just kind of continued through the end of that third year of nursing, and at some point, I actually stopped sleeping. And I kind of carried on. It was really bad though for 2 months. I stopped sleeping, just didn't feel good. And then I went on a mountain biking trip with some friends in Montana, and we got lost. And to make a long story short, got lost and ended up back at the cabin at 2 a.m. Because we carried our bikes through waist high snow and everything for hours on end. But this getting off the mountain thing sent me into a high I had sort of never experienced before. So I was really euphoric, just thought I felt on top of the world. And from here, things just went downhill over the week. I was up singing and dancing all night. I thought I was going to the Olympics as a figure skater. Just kind of was starting to have delusional thoughts. And this was really my first manic break. And I was taken into the hospital by my family.
That was that. Were you during that time at all out of body to be like this, like, who is this, or why am I acting like this, or why am I feeling like this? Or were you just really like absorbed in like that full manic state, as you said?
It was my first one, so I didn't know what was going on. So I honestly was just absorbed in the state. Like
Mm.
I was so euphoric and happy. I just thought this is great. Like I just um it's a feeling I can't describe to anybody. I've never done drugs, but I imagine it's like being on some kind of high on drugs. Like you just, it's insane how you feel. And it being my first episode, I didn't know that I was experiencing something completely abnormal. And it was pretty bad the night that my family took me in. I I thought I was going to save the world. And so I ran out of the house to escape my family, and they chased me down the street and pinned me to the ground and got me into the car and took me to the hospital. But none, my family nor I knew what was happening at the time. So it was pretty traumatic for everybody. Me at the time, I was kind of just in my euphoric world. So it was traumatic to go to the hospital, but I kind of thought in my head at the time it was all kind of part of God's plan to I was supposed to see the inside of the hospital system and I was supposed to fix it. So I just really just had all these grandiose beliefs. So I just kind of thought everything that was happening was supposed to be happening.
That must have been so hard and traumatic for you to be in that state, like completely in that state, and have your family saying there's something going on with you. There's something wrong, and taking you to the hospital. And then my understanding is your diagnosis happened fairly quick after that. And so to then on top of, you're feeling, like you said, this euphoric high, and then suddenly you're being told, well, there's something going on, and that's why you're feeling this way, and this is what it's called.
Yeah, like my initial time in the hospital was tough. Like when I got to the hospital, like I was upset because they weren't believing me that I was fine. I think I was saying my family was like they were the problem, not me. And of course I was sick, but I didn't see that. And then someone telling you like when you think like they asked me questions like, do you think you can predict the future and stuff like that? And I thought I could. So of course I'm answering these questions and then someone tells you you've got bipolar 1 disorder and yeah, it was a bit shocking. I have to say though, initially they drugged me really badly, a lot. When I got there, after my initial interview with the psychiatrist, so I kind of fell asleep right away, and I woke up on the psych ward. So kind of those initial moments of disbelief weren't too intense other than I just thought they just don't I was so caught up in my own head, I guess, that the initial stuff didn't bother. It was more when I started to come down from the high,
Mhm.
that's when it hit me. The euphoric time, I was just too sick to to know that I was actually sick. But when I was in the ward and actually came down from the high, that's when reality hit me. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, like what has happened? And then I replayed, like I remembered everything. So I replayed everything in my head. I was embarrassed. I was in shock and disbelief that I was on a psych ward. I mean, I had been the valedictorian of my high school. Like I just couldn't believe I was on a psych ward being told I had bipolar 1 disorder. So that's when the terrible feeling set in for me was
Mhm.
then.
Did having that title or that diagnosis feel helpful at that time when you came down and started remembering the things that you had done and thinking about things, or was that it was just that was just so overwhelming, and for you to you just said, go from where you had been in life to having this diagnosis that knowing what it was maybe was more challenging than anything at that point?
It was pretty overwhelming, I have to say. Like I was pretty sad in the hospital and felt pretty awful. What helped me was a lady by the name of Paya who worked at the Canadian Mental Health Association came to the hospital. She had bipolar disorder as well, and she came and visited me. And that for me was the light at the end of a very dark tunnel because she was living this normal life and successful. And so for me, seeing her, it let me know that I wasn't going to live this life of nothingness. Like I could go on and do things with my life. And it was probably that moment where I thought I'm going to be okay. And I was actually told in the hospital that first time that I probably wouldn't go back to school in the fall because this happened at the end of my semester in my third year. I was told over the summer, I probably wouldn't go back to school in the fall because I had been so sick and um, everything like that. And I said, forget that. Like I saw Paya, I'm like, I can do this. And I went back to school and I graduated top of my class. And um, I guess it was, I think then it was, I could then put it into place and say, it made sense, the diagnosis. If I looked back at my life, I had a lot of emotions, a lot of ups and downs, and the diagnosis at that point then started to make sense and I could settle into it, but it was still tough. I didn't share anything
Mm.
with anybody. It was very embarrassing to me still at that time. I didn't want anybody to know. It was something I wanted to keep secret. Of course, the people who were around me at the time, my very close friends, family, they knew what was going on, but I swore my family to secrecy because I didn't want anybody else to know.
There's so much stigma still, hey, surrounding it. And just
Um, yeah, I at that time, I mean, I was 22 years old, so I mean, that was 23 years ago. So the stigma back then was definitely there was a lot. But I have to say a lot of stigma happened to my just within my own head, like my
yeah.
own stigma. And I have to say that was probably the worst stigma over anything anybody else was saying to me. Like nobody like my friends were super supportive and everything. So I think it was more the damage I was doing in my own brain to myself than more than anything. And
Mhm.
it took me probably 10 years, I think, before I started to feel like maybe I could share a little bit. And my mom was at that point working at the Canadian Mental Health Association, and she had me come out to some of their group sessions that they help family members with mental illness, and I spent some time going to those groups and speaking to the groups. And that was the start of me starting to open up kind of in a safe atmosphere where other people, had been around it and had questions. And it was starting to feel like, oh, I can actually help people. And that kind of feeling started to make me feel better about the diagnosis and feel like, you know, maybe I can do something with this. And it was shortly after that that I was asked to sit on the board of directors for the Canadian Mental Health Association. I presented to the board and they asked me to do that. So I then got some amazing opportunities on the board to public speak. So I ended up doing a lot of public speaking events and going to being on panel interviews and stuff like that. So through that journey, it was the most healing thing for me to um, people just, they always came up to me and were thankful that I spoke because it was healing to them to hear my story and gave them a lot of hope and stuff like that. So I guess that became my mission was to, be helpful to other people and give them hope and stuff like that. So I did that. I was on the board for 9 years and then decided I wanted to get my MBA and pursue being in a different capacity, working in the mental health area. But yeah.
Yeah, that stigma, when I speak and talk about stigma, I talk about external and internal stigma and how
Mhm.
that internal stigma is often the hardest piece, whether it's even just, someone's ability, and I've struggled with this myself at times, to reach out and make that call or book that appointment because it's like, no, I got this, I don't need help. But just how, what you've done and how many people, I'm sure there's no way to quantify how many people you've helped by being able to be open and, like you said, use your experience and use your diagnosis to help others, because so many people don't get past that piece, right? They stay with
Yeah.
that stigma and they move past that. And we're very, very grateful and thankful that you're having this conversation with us today, and being able to share your story. Is there, so for anyone watching, we also interviewed Candace's mom, Mona, about this, and she spoke a lot about boundaries, especially, as, progressing through everything. Can you talk about boundaries and like how they were for you, especially and be honest, the early days, and just, I think maybe as that evolution of, as your progression from your diagnosis to now, maybe how boundaries have evolved or how you've been able to use them. Um,
Yeah, definitely the early stages of being diagnosed is far different than now, but,
yeah,
back then, um, my mom and I had a difficult relationship back then. I think there was a lot of, I felt like my mom was yelling a lot and that kind of thing, and I just felt like communication wasn't the best, and so I was very kind of frustrated, and, um my mom, uh, she learned a lot and changed a lot, through that time frame, and I think the most amazing thing about my mom is she was able to, look at herself and say, "What do I need to change, to help this situation?" And so in doing that, like, she was able to help me immensely, but, in terms of boundaries, I think it's important that, um you you do set boundaries. I think mom set boundaries with me. Like I think I was getting upset with her in the hospital and stuff. And so she was able to say, set a boundary and say, you can't talk to me like that or whatever. Like in the early stages, I was still quite sick. So she had to set some boundaries with me and I with her. And I think in doing that, we were able to move forward and now we have a wonderful relationship and it didn't happen overnight and it was so difficult at the time, but well worth the effort and the and the in some ways getting sick helped our family a lot. So not that I want to have this illness, but it's not all been bad, so um definitely you learn a lot through the process and the journey, and I I wouldn't change it because it helped our family, I think, in a lot of ways, but and we wouldn't be the people that we are today if it wasn't for what everything that happens in your life kind of thing, but yeah.
yeah. Mona's joined us for a couple of these videos, and one of the things that I really like that she brings up is how it doesn't matter whether you're the one that's being diagnosed with something or struggling with something, that there is work that you can do on yourself and learnings that can come from connecting to a professional, to whether that's how best to support someone or interact with someone that is going through something or maybe has been diagnosed with something, especially like that initial time frame. But how, I mean, we've all come through, life is challenging, and we've all had things that maybe we were brought up a certain way that we need to break, those
Mhm.
unhealthy habits and cycles for communication or reaction or what have you, and how important it is not just to look at the individual, but to look at all of the people in the family and to look at ourselves and say, okay, like what can we do to yeah, improve our communication or learn about boundaries or talk to someone so that we can, instead of having that conversation over and over or trying to fix that person, have that conversation somewhere else and get that off our chest and learn how to better approach the person we're looking to support.
Yeah, exactly, Megs. And like, I think part of it came from my nursing education. We took communication courses in nursing, and that was eye-opening to me, just the how you're supposed to talk, how communicate, ask questions, respond, like see how people, it was just so eye-opening to me how you're supposed to communicate. So, because I saw that in my nursing education, I could see how our family was not communicating well, and I think that's what was bothering me, but the fact that everybody could look at themselves and say, "What can I do better?" Like, I just love my family for that everybody did that, and we were able to, move on and make our family just a wonderful place to be because we did do the work, we did make the changes, and I would just highly recommend to anybody that, just without pointing at everybody else, just look at yourself and say, "What can I work on?" Like, we all have things to work on, and we all still have things to work on, but, just that self just looking at yourself, I think is such a huge thing that you can do for your family and your loved ones.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Would you encourage anyone else to open up about a diagnosis? You know, you've talked about how that helped you once you were kind of ready to talk about that. Is that something you would encourage, or that's more like everyone needs to figure out their own path?
Um, I've had other people come to me and ask me that question, and I've had such a wonderful experience with opening up that it was healing for me. Like I'm not embarrassed. I'm not, everybody that knows us knows I have bipolar disorder. And it's almost easier because you're not hiding behind something or
Yeah.
trying to keep stuff from people. And I'm an open person. So to hide behind something for 10 years was killing me. And now that it's out in the open and I share, when I first meet people, I don't introduce myself and say, "Hi, I'm Candace. I have bipolar disorder." Like, it's not like that.
Yeah.
It's usually more like um, I get to know someone really well because I like them to know who I am before
Mm.
they know I have an illness. And if it comes up in a conversation, I don't hide and say I don't, I bring it, I will bring it up. Um, yeah, I would just carefully bring, I like that shock factor of people, then it's people like, "Oh, you do?" And "Oh, what's that like?" Or if they don't know, kind of thing. Like I'm not somebody that you walking down the street you would just think has a severe mental illness. Where I mean, I live with, when I'm sick, I have psychosis, I have breaks from reality, I think people are trying to kill me, all that stuff. So I have a pretty severe form of it, and I just being open is something that it makes my life easier, to be honest. And it was part of, it was my own self therapy, to be honest. Like it just it made me feel so much better about everything. So I had one friend come to me, she was living with some issues, and I encouraged her to open up, and she now is just so thankful that she did, because she's living that same journey of exposure, and now she's helping others. And she's so thankful she opened up. So yeah, I wouldn't introduce myself as, "Hi, I have that," but yeah.
Well, yeah, and I loved your point about how like it is a part of who you are. And so it
Mhm.
sucks to feel like you have to hide a part of who you are. It doesn't, like you said, need to be that initial high, but once you build that relationship, to be able to be open with that person and be your true self and not feel like you have to keep part of you in a box so that they can't see it.
Yeah, and I find because people know I have it, like, between my husband and I, people open up to us about everything and anything because they know we live with this, and so we're pretty compassionate and empathetic people, and always have a listening ear for people. So um, we find that people just, because you're that person that does share, they feel comfortable sharing their stories or their struggles, and it doesn't even have to be about a mental health issue. I just find people open up about everything because they're just comfortable with you. So I don't think it's a bad thing to open up about it.
Yeah, I agree. I just open up in general. Like
Mhm.
when you share and you're vulnerable to somebody else, that creates a safe place, right? Like that builds
Yeah.
trust, and then that person it feels comfortable if there is
Yeah.
something that they want to talk about, that they have that space to do so.
It's so funny. It makes me think of this one time. So I was public speaking, and so I was on the board, and one of the board members, I was nervous about. It was one event, and I can't remember what it was, but anyways, I went to her for advice because I really valued her opinion, and she said to me, "Candace, if somebody judges you for having a mental illness, it says more about them than it does about you." So I've held true to, I've held that in my heart all these years, because I think that's the epitome of it. Really, if someone's going to judge you, it's not about you, it's about them. So, yeah, just
100%.
Yeah,
I have a almost 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I say that like, you know, when there's been kids that say mean things, I'm like, guys, I know it's hard to hear, but it's not about you. It's about them.
yeah,
You just have to
exactly.
know your self-worth and be confident in who you are, that you just
Yeah,
understand that that person's maybe hurting inside and
yeah,
it's not you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, what does support look like for
Mm.
your diagnosis? Like on, you know, if someone is maybe new to this journey, is there any pieces you can touch on, or someone who's thinking, oh, maybe that's something that I have and I need to look into? Like, what does the support process look like?
Ugh. Support is huge. I I I would not be here today if it wasn't for support. My husband is amazing, so we're a team in this because he can see if I start to get sick. He can see the symptoms and we act on it right away. Or if I start to feel symptoms, I'll go to him right away, and because we recognize like we know the symptoms now, so
Mhm.
we can pick up on it really quickly. But before it escalates, really, because it can escalate within hours for me. So we just get on it right away. I have a wonderful psychiatrist, so we start medicating pretty heavily, pretty quickly until we can get a hold of her, and he helps me monitor that because it can be a little tough on your own when you're starting to get sick
Yes.
to monitor the medications and stuff. So I've got Colin, I've got my wonderful children who are a super support. They're getting older, so they they understand things a little bit better, but they're a wonderful support too. But then I've got all of my extended family, my in-laws, I've got my own family, um, parents, siblings, sister-in-laws, brother-in-laws, everything. And everybody chips in when I get sick. So I've got kids that need to be driven places. I myself have needed a babysitter. I don't know. They come over and look after me. And I sometimes, if I get too sick um, and can't be left alone, one of the family members will come be with me if Colin, is working or something during the day or whatever it is. So we've got this huge support network of family, and then friends. Like my friends, I have so many friends that just support me through everything and have backed me through everything. I was recently in the hospital. I hadn't been hospitalized in 13 years, and then I was in the hospital last summer. And, I just had friends come visit me, send me notes of encouragement, and, so support is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just the clinicians, it's not just the medication, it is that
No.
network that is around you. And like I think,
Yeah.
you know, you saying your husband can pick up on stuff right away, how hard it must be for someone who lives alone. Because of, like you said, you
Yeah.
don't always see that right away. But he can pick up on it, and how fast you need to be able to start saying, okay, we need to go into kind of this is now we need this, and contact your psychiatrist and go through like kind of that
Yeah.
emergency plans,
Yeah.
maybe not the right word, but kind of that, okay, now we're initiating these steps to best take care of you.
For sure. And living on your own, I think it would be a huge challenge with this illness. So I could see that. And I guess if you're in that situation, I would want a plan in place for you
Mhm.
that, you know, first first signs of symptoms, you are reaching out to somebody that is a support person for you. Like if they're not living in your home but outside your home, like just that you've got somebody on speed dial that you can call, um, and start getting support in place. Because I don't like, it's different for everybody, but I know
Mhm.
for me, like I said, I can escalate within hours and be very ill. So it's not something I can mess around with.
Mhm.
So
And I'm sure it's like most diagnoses where it's such a broad spectrum of where you could kind of be at, how you react to things, how fast, like you said, you progress with something, what your experience is when, you know,
yeah. It is. I think the illness is different for everybody, and, um, there's different forms of bipolar, right? I have bipolar 1 with psychosis, so, it's a huge challenge, but, yeah, sorry, can I pause there for a second?
Yeah,
I forgot your question.
I'll ask it again.
Okay, thanks, Meg.
I'm guessing bipolar, like most diagnoses, there's such a wide range of where you could fall on that spectrum, what you experience, how fast you progress, and there's probably different types of bipolar that fall within that as well. Can you speak to kind of the variation that's in there?
Yeah, like, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I
Yeah.
wouldn't wanna say this is this and this is that because it's, there's a manual that describes every form of each bipolar disorder. I have bipolar 1, with psychosis, so not everybody gets psychosis with bipolar 1, but I do. So psychosis just means I have a break in reality, so I get grandiose what they call grandiose delusions. So for me, I've like thought I was going to be the CEO of Alberta Health Services, thought I was the second coming of Christ. I also get paranoid delusions. So I think the Mormons are trying to kill me. Like it's just not based in reality at all. So I get psychosis when I get mania. And I also get the euphoria with it. So the really high feelings, very energetic. Um, and that kind of thing. So, and it ranges, I think, for everybody, and there's different spectrums of it, right? So there's bipolar 2, there's cyclothymia. So there's different types of bipolar, and within each diagnosis, everyone's going to experience it a bit differently, and not we're all made differently. So it's different for everybody for sure.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to share or that you would like people to know about bipolar or living with it?
Um, I guess what I would want people to know is that you can have a very productive, successful life living with it. It's not being diagnosed with it isn't like the end of the world. It's hard, it's not easy. You go through challenging times, but um life is still good. So I've done lots of things with my life that I'm happy about, and like I was I was nervous to go back, like when I went back to school to get my MBA. I honestly wasn't sure that I could even accomplish that. It was because my illness is so severe. It was something that I dreamed about completing, but I didn't know if I could. But I guess what I decided was, you know what? If I start it and I can't do it, then, so be it. Uh, I'll I'll never know though if I don't try. So I went and I was able to do it, and I had some times in there that I had little breakthrough manias. We got me medicated really quickly. Somehow got through 3 years of intense schooling, and it just you can do these things. So I just would encourage people that you can accomplish things, and just like in terms of school, like if you're ever like I know I've talked to university students and stuff, like if you're thinking of going to university, you can do these things, and they for people with illnesses, they do have accommodations if you need them at the university to help you get through. So don't don't think you can't do things just because you have this illness. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's such a powerful message to end this on, and I hope for anyone out there that that gives them the same feeling of that light at the end of the tunnel that you had initially when you saw that woman who was successful and powerful in her own right, and you're like, yeah, I can do this.
Yeah. Thank you, Megs. Yeah, that's the message I always want to leave with people is a message of hope. You've got this.
Well, Candace, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing today. Your story is incredible. This is the first time we connected, but I'm amazed by you. I'm so proud of where you're at. I really appreciate your time and your words today. For anyone looking to learn more about mental health in agriculture, to find resources for mental health in agriculture, please visit our website. It is domore.ag. On our website, you will also find a connection to Ag Talk, which is a national peer-to-peer support platform monitored 24/7 by clinicians for anyone who identifies as working, living, or playing in the agricultural industry. Candace, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you.